Have you ever said something in anger, something that changed absolutely everything in your life? I did. It was a single moment, one fleeting instant in time, and it shook my entire world to its very core. But let me tell you something that might surprise you, something that took me weeks to understand, something that I need you to hear. It was the best decision I ever made in my entire life. You know what? I need to take you back to that day. I need you to understand what happened, how it all unraveled, how everything I thought I knew about family and love and belonging just came crashing down around me, like shattered glass. Because this isn't just my story. This is a story about breaking free, about finding yourself when everything else falls apart, about choosing yourself when the world tells you that's selfish. It started like any other day. Can you believe that? Just another ordinary morning. I woke up, got dressed, went about my routine like I had done 1,000 times before. There was nothing special about it, nothing that screamed, "Today your life will change forever." But that's how it always happens, isn't it? The moments that define us don't come with warning labels or preparation time. They just hit you, right in the face, when you least expect it. But then, things got out of hand. Everything escalated so quickly. One minute we were having what I thought was just another argument, another disagreement, like we'd had so many times before. My mom and we'd always had this complicated relationship. You know the kind I'm talking about? Where you love someone so deeply it hurts, but you also hurt each other in ways that leave scars you can't see but feel every single day. That was us. That had always been us. The tension had been building for weeks, maybe even months if I'm being honest with myself. Little things kept adding up. The passive-aggressive comments, the judgmental looks, the way she would compare me to other people's daughters, like I was somehow defective, somehow not enough. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield, never knowing which step would trigger an explosion. That morning, I can't even remember what started it. Isn't that crazy? The fight that changed my life, and I can't tell you what the initial spark was. Maybe it was about my career choices. Maybe it was about my relationship status. Maybe it was about how I was living my life, making my own decisions, being my own person. Whatever it was, it lit a fuse that had been waiting to burn for years. Actually, let me back up. Let me tell you about the years leading up to that moment. Because this wasn't just one bad day. This was the culmination of a lifetime of pain, of trying and failing to be enough for someone who would never see me as enough. This was years of accumulated hurt finally reaching its breaking point. I remember being a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, coming home from school so excited to show my mom a drawing I had made. I had worked on it for hours, put so much effort into every detail. I was so proud of it. I ran into the house, practically bursting with excitement, and I showed it to her. And you know what she said? She pointed out everything wrong with it. The colors weren't right, the proportions were off. I had smudged the corner, not one word of praise, not one acknowledgement of my effort, just criticism. That's how it always was. Nothing I did was ever good enough. I could bring home straight A's, and she would ask why I didn't get extra credit. I could win an award, and she would mention how someone else won a bigger one. I could achieve something I was proud of, and she would find a way to diminish it, to make me feel like it wasn't that impressive after all. I spent my childhood desperately trying to earn her approval. I became an overachiever, thinking that if I just did better, if I just tried harder, if I just accomplished more, she would finally be proud of me. She would finally look at me with love and acceptance instead of disappointment and criticism. But it never happened. No matter what I achieved, it was never enough. In high school, I was at the top of my class, captain of 2 sports teams, president of 3 clubs, volunteering every weekend, barely sleeping, because I was so busy trying to be perfect. And I was exhausted, so incredibly exhausted. But I kept pushing because I thought that eventually, she would see me, really see me, and she would be proud. But she wasn't. She would attend my games and point out my mistakes on the drive home. She would look at my report card and focus on the one A- among all the A's. She would come to my events and spend the whole time talking about other people's children and their accomplishments. I was invisible to her, unless I was failing to meet her standards. Do you know what that does to a child? Do you know what it feels like to grow up believing that your worth is conditional, that love has to be earned, that you are fundamentally not enough? It destroys you from the inside out. It creates this constant anxiety, this voice in your head that sounds suspiciously like your mother, always criticizing, always pointing out flaws, always reminding you that you're not good enough. I developed terrible anxiety. I would have panic attacks before big events because I knew she would find something wrong with my performance. I would lie awake at night, replaying conversations, analyzing every word I said, wondering where I went wrong. I became a perfectionist to the point of self-destruction because perfect was the only thing that might possibly be acceptable. And the worst part? I didn't even realize how toxic it was. I thought this was normal. I thought all mothers were like this. I thought constant criticism was just tough love, that she was pushing me to be better because she cared. I made excuses for her behavior. I defended her to friends who would gently suggest that maybe she was being too hard on me. I internalized her voice so completely that I became my own worst critic. College was supposed to be my escape. I went away to school, excited to finally have some distance, some space to figure out who I was, without her constant judgment. And for a while, it was amazing. I felt like I could breathe for the first time. I made friends who actually liked me for who I was. I explored interests that she had always dismissed as frivolous. I started to discover parts of myself that had been buried under years of trying to be who she wanted me to be. But she found ways to maintain control even from a distance. Constant phone calls, questioning my choices. Unexpected visits to check on me that were really just opportunities to criticize my living situation, my friends, my appearance. Conditional financial support that came with strings attached and expectations I could never meet. She made sure I knew that even though I was physically away, I was never really free from her influence. I remember one visit in particular. It was my sophomore year, and I had finally found something I was passionate about. I was taking this creative writing class, and I loved it. For the first time in my life, I was doing something not because it would look good on a resume, or because it would impress someone, but because it brought me joy. Pure, simple joy. I showed her a story I had written. I was nervous, but also excited, because I thought maybe, just maybe, she would appreciate this glimpse into who I really was. She read it in silence while I sat there, my heart pounding, waiting for her reaction. And when she finished, she looked at me and said, "This is what you're wasting your time on? This isn't going to get you a job. This isn't going to make you successful. You need to focus on practical things, Emily. Stop being so foolish." I felt like I had been slapped. The joy I had felt, the passion I had discovered, it all just shriveled up inside me. I stopped taking creative writing classes. I stopped writing altogether. Because if the thing that made me happy was foolish, if pursuing joy was a waste of time, then what was the point? That's what she did. She took the things that made me happy, and made me feel guilty for enjoying them. She convinced me that my interests were worthless, that my passions were impractical, that the real me was something to be ashamed of and hidden away. And I believed her. I let her voice become my internal voice, constantly policing my thoughts and feelings, constantly telling me I was doing everything wrong. After college, I got a job in my field. A good job, one that I had worked hard to get. I was proud of myself, excited to start this new chapter of my life. But when I told her about it, she immediately started comparing it to other jobs, other opportunities, other people's career trajectories. "That's nice, Emily, but did you know Sarah's daughter just got offered a position at this prestigious company, and they're paying her so much more than what you're making? Maybe you should have tried harder during your interviews." Nothing I did was ever enough. And the pain of that realization was crushing. I would never be enough for her. I could achieve everything I had ever dreamed of, and she would still find something to criticize. I could become the most successful person in the world, and she would still compare me unfavorably to someone else. Because the problem wasn't me, it was her. But I couldn't see that yet. I started seeing a therapist in my mid-20s. Best decision I ever made, or at least it was until the day I finally left. My therapist helped me start to see the patterns, to recognize the emotional manipulation, to understand that the way my mother treated me wasn't normal, or healthy, or acceptable. It was abuse. Emotional abuse. And that label scared me at first, because it felt so dramatic, so extreme. But it was true. My therapist taught me about boundaries. That concept was revolutionary to me. I didn't even know I was allowed to have boundaries with my mother. I thought I owed her unlimited access to my life, my decisions, my feelings. But I started trying to set small boundaries. Nothing major at first. Just little things like not answering every phone call immediately, not sharing every detail of my life, not accepting every piece of criticism without pushback. And my mother hated it. She absolutely hated it. Every boundary I tried to set was met with guilt trips, manipulation, anger. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? I'm your mother. I deserve to know what's going on in your life. You're being so disrespectful and ungrateful. She made me feel like setting boundaries was a betrayal, like protecting my own mental health was an act of cruelty against her. The guilt was overwhelming. Because she was right about one thing. She was my mother. She had raised me, fed me, clothed me, put a roof over my head. Didn't I owe her something for that? Didn't I owe her my obedience, my compliance, my willingness to endure her treatment? That's what she always said. That's what she always made me believe. But my therapist helped me understand something crucial. Yes, parents provide for their children. That's their job. That's what they sign up for when they decide to have kids. But that doesn't give them the right to treat their children however they want. Providing basic necessities doesn't earn someone the right to be emotionally abusive. Love shouldn't come with conditions and requirements and constant criticism. Still, knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two very different things. I understood that my mother's behavior was wrong, but I still felt guilty for pulling away. I still felt like a bad daughter. I still desperately wanted her approval, even though I was starting to understand I would never get it. The year before that final fight was particularly difficult. I had started dating someone who made me happy, someone who treated me with respect and kindness and genuine affection, someone who saw me for who I really was and loved that person, not some idealized version they wanted me to become. It was the first healthy relationship I had ever been in, and it showed me just how unhealthy my relationship with my mother was. My boyfriend, his name was David, he couldn't believe the way my mother spoke to me. He would witness our phone calls, see how anxious I would get before talking to her, watch me crumble after particularly harsh criticisms, and he would ask me, gently, why I put up with it, why I let her treat me that way, why I didn't just walk away, and I didn't have a good answer. Because she's my mother, because that's just how she is, because I keep hoping she'll change, because I love her even though she hurts me, because I don't know how to exist without that relationship, toxic as it is, because I'm scared of being alone, of being without family, of being the person who abandoned her mother. David never pushed me. He never gave me ultimatums or demanded that I cut her off. He just loved me, consistently and unconditionally, and in doing so, he showed me what I was missing. He showed me that love doesn't have to hurt, that relationships don't have to be battlegrounds, that it's possible to be yourself and be accepted for it. My mother hated him, of course. She had never approved of anyone I dated, always finding something wrong with them. But David, she particularly despised because he made me happy and gave me strength. He encouraged me to set boundaries, to stand up for myself, to stop accepting treatment that was destroying me. And she saw him as a threat to her control over me. She would make snide comments about him. She would question his intentions, his character, his suitability. She would compare him unfavorably to other people's partners. She would hint that he was manipulating me, turning me against her, coming between us, and part of me knew she was projecting, that she was the one being manipulative, but another part of me still doubted, still wondered if maybe she was right. The final straw came when she insisted on having dinner with us. David and I had been together for about a year at this point, and I had been avoiding having them spend too much time together because I knew it would be a disaster. But she kept pushing, kept guilt-tripping me about how I was keeping him away from her, how she just wanted to get to know him better, how it was important for family to be involved. So we went to dinner. And it was a nightmare. She spent the entire evening criticizing him. His job wasn't good enough. His family wasn't prestigious enough. His manners weren't proper enough. She questioned his education, his ambitions, his plans for the future. She made it clear that in her eyes, he wasn't good enough for me, or rather, he wasn't good enough for the version of me she wanted me to be. David handled it with grace and patience, far more than the situation deserved, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. I could feel my own anger building. This man who had shown me nothing but kindness and love, who had supported me through so much, who had helped me start to heal from years of emotional damage, and she was treating him like garbage because he didn't meet her impossible standards. After dinner, David asked me a question that I couldn't stop thinking about. He said, "Emily, if a friend treated you the way your mother treats you, would you stay friends with them?" And the answer was immediate and obvious. No. Of course not. I would never tolerate from a friend what I was accepting from my mother. I would never let a friend speak to me that way, criticize me that way, make me feel that way. So why was I accepting it from her? Because she's my mother. That was always the answer. That was always the excuse. But was that really a good enough reason to endure abuse? Was blood really thicker than water when that blood was toxic? When those family ties were chains holding me back from being happy and healthy and whole? I started pulling away even more after that dinner. I screened her calls. I kept our conversations brief and surface level. I stopped telling her things about my life because I knew she would just use the information to hurt me. I was building walls between us, protecting myself from further damage. And she noticed. She would call me ungrateful, disrespectful, cruel. She would cry and tell me how much I was hurting her by being distant. She would remind me of all the sacrifices she had made for me, all the things she had given up. She would paint herself as the victim, and me as the villain in this story. And part of me, the part that had been conditioned since childhood to take responsibility for her feelings, wanted to apologize and try harder to make her happy. But a bigger part of me, the part that was finally waking up, was angry, so unbelievably angry, angry at her, for treating me this way, angry at myself, for accepting it, for so long, angry at the world for telling me that mothers are sacred and should be honored no matter what, angry at the years I had lost trying to be someone I wasn't, angry at the pain I had endured, thinking it was normal and acceptable, just angry. That anger had been building inside me for months, maybe years. I could feel it simmering beneath the surface of every interaction with her. Every criticism added fuel to the fire. Every guilt trip poured gasoline on the flames. Every manipulation was another spark, and I was getting closer and closer to an explosion. My therapist warned me. She said that I needed to address this anger, to find healthy ways to express it before it came out in ways I might regret. She suggested writing a letter to my mother, whether I sent it or not, just to get my feelings out. She suggested role-playing, difficult conversations in our sessions. She suggested gradually increasing my boundaries until I felt safe and strong enough to have a real confrontation. But I wasn't ready. I was still too scared, too guilty, too conditioned to please her and avoid conflict at all costs. I kept thinking that maybe if I just gave it a little more time, if I just waited a little longer, somehow things would magically get better without me having to do anything uncomfortable. Denial is a powerful thing. The weeks leading up to that final fight were particularly tense. My mother had started ramping up her criticism and manipulation. I think she sensed that she was losing control over me, that I was slipping away, and she was desperately trying to pull me back in. The phone calls became more frequent and more hostile. The guilt trips became more elaborate and more painful. The comparisons to other people became more blatant and more hurtful. She started involving other family members, calling my aunts and telling them her version of events, painting me as this terrible daughter who was abandoning her poor mother for no reason, creating this narrative where she was the long-suffering parent and I was the ungrateful, selfish child, turning people against me before I even had a chance to tell my side of the story. And I felt so alone. So incredibly alone. Because how do you explain to people who haven't experienced it? How do you make them understand that yes, she's my mother, but that doesn't give her the right to treat me this way? How do you convey the years of pain and damage and manipulation in a way that makes sense to someone who sees her putting on her sweet, caring mother act? People don't want to believe that mothers can be abusive. We're so conditioned to revere motherhood, to see it as this sacred bond that can do no wrong. So when you try to speak up about a toxic mother, people dismiss you. They tell you that you're being dramatic, that you're not seeing her side, that she's doing the best she can, that you'll understand when you have kids of your own, that you'll regret it when she's gone. But I was drowning, absolutely drowning in this relationship, and nobody seemed to understand that. Nobody seemed to see that staying was killing me slowly, piece by piece, day by day. Except David. And my therapist, and a few close friends, who had witnessed enough of my mother's behavior to understand. But to everyone else, I was just being difficult. The day of the final fight started early. She had called me at 7 in the morning, which she knew I hated, because I'm not a morning person. But she didn't care about what I liked or didn't like. She called when it was convenient for her, regardless of whether it was convenient for me. That was always how it worked. I answered the phone, groggy and confused, and immediately she launched into complaints. About my life, about my choices, about how I never called her anymore, about how I was changing and she didn't recognize me, about how David was a bad influence, about how I needed to start being more respectful and grateful. On and on and on. I tried to defend myself. I tried to explain. I tried to set a boundary and tell her that I wasn't going to have this conversation at 7 in the morning. But she wouldn't listen. She never listened. She just kept talking over me, kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And I could feel that anger rising up in me, that rage that I had been suppressing for so long. We ended that call with nothing resolved, as usual. But I was shaking, literally shaking with anger and frustration and pain. I couldn't focus on anything all day. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, thinking of all the things I should have said, all the ways I should have stood up for myself. The anger just kept building. And then she showed up at my apartment that evening, unannounced, uninvited, just showed up because she wanted to talk. And by talk, she meant lecture me about how I was living my life wrong, and needed to listen to her, and follow her advice, and stop being so stubborn and difficult. I tried to stay calm. I really did. I tried to use the techniques my therapist had taught me. Deep breaths, neutral responses, firm boundaries. But she wasn't having it. She kept pushing, kept criticizing, kept telling me how disappointed she was in who I had become. And then she brought up David again. Started saying terrible things about him, about our relationship, about how he was manipulating me, and I was too naive to see it. Started demanding that I break up with him, that I listen to her because she knew better, that I owe her that much after everything she had done for me. Something snapped. All that anger, all that pain, all that rage that had been building for years, just exploded out of me. I started yelling, really yelling, telling her that she didn't get to control my life anymore, that I was an adult who could make my own decisions, that her constant criticism was destroying me, that I was tired of never being good enough, that I couldn't do this anymore. And that's when she screamed it. "You are not my daughter." The words hung in the air between us. Time seemed to stop. Everything went quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I could feel tears burning in my eyes, though I refused to let them fall. I could sense the weight of those words settling onto my shoulders, like a physical burden. My mom yelled at me. And when I say yelled, I don't mean she raised her voice a little. I mean she screamed with a rage that I had never heard before, with a venom that cut right through me. "You are not my daughter." Those words, those 5 words, they hung in the air like poison gas, suffocating everything good that had ever existed between us. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. You know that feeling when you've been holding something in for so long, so incredibly long, and then suddenly it just bursts out of you? It was like a dam breaking. All the hurt, all the anger, all the pain I had been carrying around for years, just exploded. I felt my heart racing, pounding so hard I thought it might burst right out of my chest. My hands were shaking, my vision blurred with tears that I refused to let fall because I was so angry, so unbelievably angry. How dare she say that to me? How dare she reject me like I was nothing, like our entire relationship meant nothing, like I meant nothing? The emotional intensity of that moment was overwhelming. It was like every painful memory, every hurtful comment, every disappointment, every moment when I felt like I wasn't good enough for her, came flooding back all at once. It was suffocating. It was crushing. It was unbearable. But it was also clarifying. Because in that moment, I realized something that I had been afraid to admit to myself. If she could say that to me, if she could disown me so easily, if she could reject me so completely, then maybe I didn't need her. Maybe I had never needed her approval. Maybe I could survive without her. I stood there, frozen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. My mind was racing, spinning, trying to process what had just happened. Did she really just say that? Did she really just disown me? Did she really just throw away our relationship like it was garbage? Yes, she did. And you know what? Maybe it was time for me to do the same. The clarity that came over me in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was like suddenly seeing clearly after years of looking through a foggy window. She didn't love me. Not really. Not in any healthy, genuine way. She loved the idea of who she wanted me to be. She loved having control over me. She loved having someone to criticize and manipulate and project all her own issues onto. But she didn't love me. The real me. The authentic me. And if she didn't love me, then what was I holding on to? Why was I sacrificing my happiness, my mental health, my entire sense of self, to maintain a relationship with someone who didn't even see me as a person? Why was I setting myself on fire to keep her warm? I couldn't take it anymore. The years of trying to please her, trying to live up to impossible standards, trying to be someone I wasn't, just to earn her approval, I was done. So completely done. The weight of it all, the exhaustion of constantly walking on eggshells, constantly apologizing for being myself, constantly feeling like I was failing. It was crushing me, and I couldn't carry it anymore. I just couldn't. I looked her in the eyes, really looked at her. And for the first time in my life, I didn't see my mother. I saw someone who had been hurting me, controlling me, making me feel small and worthless, and not enough. I saw someone who claimed to love me, but whose actions said otherwise. I saw someone who was so damaged herself, that she couldn't help but damage me in return. I saw someone I needed to break free from, if I ever wanted to be happy. My voice came out stronger than I expected. It was steady, clear, firm. There was no shakiness, no uncertainty, no apology in it. It came from somewhere deep inside me, from a part of myself I didn't even know existed. A part that was strong and brave, and done being mistreated. And I said words I never thought I would say. Words that felt both terrifying and liberating at the same time. You are not my mother too. The silence that followed was deafening. She stared at me, shock written all across her face. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I think she expected me to cry, to apologize, to beg for her forgiveness like I had done so many times before. I think she expected me to break down and tell her I didn't mean it, and plead with her to take back what she said. But not this time. This time was different. This time, I meant every single word. And without thinking, without planning, without considering the consequences, I turned around and walked out. Just like that. I went to my room, pulled out a suitcase, and started packing. My hands moved on autopilot, grabbing clothes, toiletries, important documents, things I couldn't leave behind. My mind was surprisingly clear, focused on the practical steps of leaving, because if I stopped to think about what I was actually doing, about the enormity of this decision, I might have lost my nerve. Every item I packed felt symbolic. This shirt she hated because it was too revealing. These jeans, she said, made me look improper. This book, she said, was a waste of time. Each thing I put in that suitcase was a tiny act of rebellion, a small declaration of independence. These were my things, my choices, my preferences, and I was taking them with me. I was taking myself with me. She stood in the doorway, watching me pack, and she didn't say a word. Not one single word. Part of me wanted her to stop me, to apologize, to take it all back, to become the mother I had always wished she could be. But a bigger part of me, the part that was finally finding its voice and its strength, was relieved by her silence. Because it confirmed what I already knew deep down. This was the right decision. This was the only decision. The courage it took to make that choice. I can't even begin to describe it. Walking away from your family, from the person who raised you, from the home you grew up in, from everything familiar, it goes against everything we're taught. We're supposed to honor our parents, respect them, stay loyal to them no matter what. Family is supposed to be forever. Blood is supposed to be thicker than water. You're supposed to forgive and forget and keep trying. But what about when staying means losing yourself? What about when loyalty means betraying your own needs, your own happiness, your own mental health? What about when honoring your parents means dishonoring yourself? What about when family is the source of your deepest pain, rather than your greatest comfort? Nobody talks about that. Nobody prepares you for that. I zipped up that suitcase with trembling hands. Each zip sounded so final, so permanent. This was really happening. I was really leaving. The home I had known my entire life. I was walking away from it. The woman who gave birth to me. I was cutting ties with her. Everything familiar, everything safe, everything known. I was leaving it all behind. And stepping into what? The unknown. The uncertain. The terrifying possibility that I might not be okay. But I had to believe that anything was better than staying. I had to believe that the unknown couldn't be worse than the known misery I was living in. I had to trust that I was strong enough to survive on my own, even though I had never really been on my own before, even though I was scared out of my mind. And let me tell you, it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying, because as much as that relationship was toxic, as much as it was hurting me, it was still familiar. And humans, we crave familiarity, even when it's destroying us. The devil you know feels safer than the devil you don't. The pain you're used to feels more manageable than the pain you might encounter in something new. But staying would have killed me. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Staying would have destroyed who I truly was. It would have kept me trapped in this cycle of seeking approval I would never receive, trying to be someone I could never become, sacrificing myself on the altar of her impossible expectations. And I finally understood that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. I walked out of that house with my suitcase in hand, and I didn't look back. Not once, because I knew if I looked back, if I saw that house, those windows, that door, the place where I had spent my entire childhood, I might have wavered. I might have second-guessed myself. I might have convinced myself to give it one more try, to apologize for standing up for myself, to go back to the familiar pain, rather than face the unknown. And I couldn't afford to do that. Not when I had finally found the strength to leave. The first few days were a blur. I crashed at my friend Sarah's place. Sarah, who had been telling me for years that I needed to set boundaries with my mom, that the relationship was unhealthy, that I deserved better. She welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked, no judgment given, just pure support and unconditional acceptance. And that kindness, that simple act of letting me stay without making me feel like a burden, it made me realize how starved I had been for exactly that kind of treatment. Sarah let me cry, she let me rage, she let me process everything that had happened without trying to fix it or minimize it, or tell me what I should do next. She just held space for me while I fell apart. And I needed to fall apart. I needed to let out all the emotions I had been suppressing for years. But then, as the initial adrenaline wore off, as the shock of what I had done started to fade, reality started to set in. 2 weeks passed, and I started questioning everything, every single thing. Was I wrong? Did I overreact? Did I make a terrible mistake by leaving? Should I have tried harder to work things out? Should I have been more patient, more understanding, more forgiving? Was I a bad daughter for walking away? The self-doubt was crushing. It kept me up at night, whispering poisonous thoughts in my ear. You abandoned your mother. You're selfish. You're going to regret this. Family is supposed to stick together no matter what. You should have been more patient. You should have been more understanding. This is all your fault. She was right about you. You are a terrible person. 8. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling of Sarah's guest room, replaying that argument over and over and over again in my mind, analyzing every word, every gesture, every moment, wondering what I could have done differently, wondering if there was some magical combination of words that could have fixed everything, wondering if I had just tried a little harder, been a little better, maybe things would have worked out. The guilt was overwhelming. Because even though she had hurt me, even though she had said terrible things, even though she had made my life miserable for years, she was still my mother. And society tells us that mothers are sacred, that mother-daughter bonds are unbreakable, that we owe them everything because they gave us life. So what kind of person was I for walking away? What kind of daughter abandons her mother? I questioned whether I was being too sensitive, too emotional, too dramatic. Maybe her words weren't that bad. Maybe I was just overreacting to what was actually normal mother-daughter conflict. Maybe I was making a big deal out of nothing. Maybe I was the problem, not her. Maybe I was too difficult, too sensitive, too needy. Maybe if I had just been a better daughter, none of this would have happened. These thoughts tormented me constantly during those 2 weeks. Every waking moment was consumed by doubt and guilt and second-guessing. I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't enjoy anything. I couldn't think about anything except whether I had made the biggest mistake of my life. The inner conflict was tearing me apart from the inside out. Part of me missed her desperately. I would see something funny, and instinctively reach for my phone to call her before remembering that we weren't talking. I would have a bad day, and wish I could talk to her about it, even though talking to her usually made my bad days worse. I would remember good times we had shared, rare moments of connection and warmth, and actual motherly love, and wonder if I had thrown all of that away over one fight. But another part of me felt lighter than I had in years. I could breathe without feeling like someone was standing on my chest. I could make decisions about my day, my life, my future, without fear of judgment or criticism. I could just exist without constantly bracing myself for the next attack, the next insult, the next way she would find to make me feel small. And that freedom, it was intoxicating. It was addictive. It was everything I didn't know I needed. I want to hear your story. Have you ever made a tough decision like this? Drop a comment below and share your experience. And if you're ready to put yourself first, don't forget to like and subscribe for even more intriguing stories.